Hello, Washington football fans, and welcome to another edition of the Washington Wrap, a 10-minute single-issue show where me and my co-hosts try to sink our teeth into one hot topic and really try to wrap it up with a 10-minute timeline. My co-hosts today are Robbie Duncan and Felix Trammell, who we'll get to in a moment, and we are recording this shortly after the end of the last preseason game for the Washington football team for 2021. We're not really going to spend much time talking about the quality of the football product on the field tonight specifically. This episode is more about wrapping up training camp and the preseason as an entire package. You know, the pretend stuff is over, and the next time we see the Washington football team take the field is going to be for regular season football. That's the important stuff, and that's what matters. But tonight, you know, we saw some starters rested. We saw some backups try to vie for the final roster spots, and there's some important things to consider when we talk about that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to start the clock. We have 10 minutes to wrap it up, and let's get into it now. And Robbie and Felix, welcome to the show. I'm going to start by reading a list, courtesy of the Washington Post's Nikki Javala, of the players who were out tonight, because this really does represent a strong indication of who the starters and the key backups are. So, from the top, this is a long list of names, and I'll try to speed through it. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Logan Thomas, Terry McLaurin, Diami Brown, Adam Humphries, Cam Sims, Antonio Gibson, Charles Leno, Eric Flowers, Chase Roullier, Brandon Scherf, Sam Cosme, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, John Allen, Deron Payne, Matt Ioannidis, James Smith-Williams, Jamin Davis, Cole Holcomb, John Bostic, Kendall Fuller, Landon Collins, Bobby McCain, Cam Curl, and Benjamin St. Juste. There's a couple of surprises in there. Guys like James Smith-Williams, probably even Cam Sims, Diami Brown, like guys who I probably didn't think had solidified a spot in the starting 53. I still would have been surprised to see them cut, but I thought we might see them tonight. But the fact is that this is a significant chunk of the playing roster for the Washington football team who didn't play tonight, which means they're likely safe for the 53. When you saw this and when you realised who was going to be playing tonight and who wasn't going to be playing tonight, Felix, I'll start with you. What jumped out at you about what that represents for this roster for 2021?
It's a good roster. I like it. I think the one that probably stood out to me the most was Cam Sims. He's well liked. He's well liked by the coaching staff. He's well liked by everybody. But I saw him fighting for a job, and I think the Kelvin Harmon getting cut early was beneficial for him, and the Steven Sims being released as well kind of made it solidified for him because he comes as the big body for that group. So just putting in that work, because the knock on him for a while was he just didn't understand the playbook and things of that nature, and that's kind of turned himself on his head, and he can play both outside receiver positions. So I think that's the bigger shock there. Also, maybe James Smith-Williams, not necessarily that he wasn't going to make the roster. I always felt he would make the roster. I just think he needed more reps and getting more work at being an outside pass rusher because you need that third person. Ryan Kerrigan was very underrated in that role last year. You saw what he could do when he was fresh. There were games where he would have 2 or 3 sacks and 20-some snaps. So you need that third person to come in and be effective and be a threat and not give the tackles for the other team kind of a break when Sweat and Young aren't in there. So I think those were the two that probably stood out for me from that list.
I like it. Robbie, I hate to make you always the O-line guy, but there's some interesting storylines from the O-line there with the guys who were named as out for tonight. Good to see Sam Cosme there. We also saw some guys like Sadiq Charles get some extra reps tonight. How do you feel about the offensive line heading into this season? Because there is a lot of change, and it's, you know, we've seen across the NFL teams who have changed offensive lines have tended to play their starters more just to get them some more reps with their offensive lines. We saw it with Pat Mahomes, for example. How are you feeling about the offensive line going into 2021?
I mean, I feel pretty confident. I think the depth overall that this line has is the best it's been in a while. I mean, you've got the fact that Wes Schweitzer and Eric Flowers are battling it out for that left guard spot, and the loser is on the bench. I mean, that speaks to the depth that we got. Because I mean, I was a big fan of what Schweitzer did in the starting capacity he got last season. So him coming off the bench, if it is Flowers being the starting guy, I mean, that's a great thing. That's a great problem to have. If whether Flowers or Sheriff goes down, you got Schweitzer that's going to come in and play either spot. So that's great. And I still, he looked like he took a step back to me for tackle for Cornelius Lucas. He had a couple of reps where he was getting beat around the edge, where he didn't necessarily get beat like that, in my opinion, in the spring. And I was very high on what he did last year as well. Not in spring, excuse me, last season. But yeah, overall, I think the tackle depth is pretty solid and the guard depth is solid. I do have some questions about the backup center. I guess Tyler Larson's kind of secured that spot, but I guess he hasn't done anything to wow me. But the fact that his name hasn't really come up either, I guess, is a good sign as well. So overall, I'm pretty confident about what this offensive line can do for the team.
Okay, so Robbie, I'll start with you and then Felix jump in. Now that we have a pretty good and semi-accurate, at the very least, idea of what the final 53-man roster is going to look like, what is the weak spot for this roster, do you think?
You want to go first, Felix?
Oh, all right. For me, it's linebacker. And I wrote about this a couple of days ago. I had 3 positions I was worried about. Linebacker is probably my one. I love our starters. I love Holcomb. I love Jamin Davis. People have to realize Jamin Davis started 10 games at Kentucky in the SEC. So he's still learning that position. He doesn't have a lot of time at that position. And John Bostic, I love him as the quarterback of the defense. He calls great games. He's essential in the run game. But behind that, if one of those 3 gets hurt, it's going to be an issue. And the defense can cover it up if they can go to that kind of strong nickel where they use all 3 safeties, where they use Landon Collins, Cameron Curl, and Bobby McCain, and that Buffalo nickel is playing that linebacker spot. But then we don't want to do that for extended periods of time. Kaleki Hudson has not really had a good camp. He has not impressed much. He's undersized and hasn't shown a lot of bursts. So he's going to make the roster, but I don't think he's what they expect. And beyond that, you're talking about Mayo and Justin Phillips and some of these guys that may not make the team. I really think after cuts this coming week on Tuesday, they're going to pick up a linebacker or 2. I just feel like that is the one position that they really need to address going forward.
Interesting. Robbie, what about you?
I'd say the rotational depth with the edge. I mean, after Montez Sweat and Chase Young, what do they really have? James Smith-Williams in this preseason hasn't really done much. And then the guys behind them, the guys we drafted, William Bradley King and Shaka Toney, and hasn't been very, they're not boosting our confidence or giving us really anything to go off of right now. So I don't know. I think there's some concerns there with what they got. I mean, at the time when they were drafted, it was like, wow, it looks like they got some steals at this point, but they haven't really shown much right now. So that's a bit of a concern. I do like what, he is an ODU grad, but Bumby Rotimi has looked pretty good in his limited capacity. He's made some plays this preseason. So maybe he squeaks in, maybe not in the 53, but practice squad guy that they could keep around and then maybe bring up down the road if need be. But that's my concern right now is our depth at edge rusher.
Fair enough. Well, we have about 2.5 minutes left, and probably the hottest topic on Washington football Twitter at the moment, or at least one of them, not including photo attribution, is whether or not Dustin Hopkins should have had competition in camp as at the kicking spot, whether or not we have faith in Dustin Hopkins moving into the season. Now, cards on the table, I've been pretty open about this on Twitter. I like Dustin Hopkins. I still think he's an above-average NFL kicker. There's not a dearth of kickers around there who are like 90%, 85% kickers. So I'm fine with it. I'm confident in him. I'm still happy to go into the season with him. I believe, Robbie, you're probably someone on the other side of that fence. So let's start with you and then we'll go to Felix. Dustin Hopkins, is he safe?
I mean, I think he is, but I don't think he should be. I don't know, man. He's so inconsistent, and he's really been on my bad side since that game in England against the Bengals.
England.
Old England, that's right. But I don't know. It's just he's not been good recently, and I feel like the excuses have kind of just looking for reasons why he's not that bad. Look, he's done this in the past. I don't know. It's just he's not reliable. He's not consistent. Yes, there's probably not much else out there right now that's better than what we got, but that doesn't mean we can't be frustrated with what he's doing right now. That's about where I am with that. I mean, I understand the grass isn't always greener, and there probably wouldn't be greener if we made anything happen right now. But again, I think we're allowed to be a little frustrated with what he's doing.
50 seconds, Felix. Your final thoughts on Dustin and also just the preseason and training camp in general?
I think as far as Dustin Hopkins is concerned, you should bring someone in. I think good teams do that. Like the Ravens brought in a guy and they have Justin Tucker, who's probably top 5 kicker ever. And teams just do that. And I think it's something that should have been done, but once it was not done, you don't bring someone in August. You bring them in May and have them go through the whole competition. And then if they push them out the door, they push Dustin out the door and he steps up. I wasn't a fan of bringing someone in August 15th and trying to have them kick and they're under pressure and it's not going to look good for either or. As far as training camp is concerned, I've been pleasantly surprised with training camp. I did not get to see training camp last year. I saw it 2 years ago when it was still Jake Gruden, and you can see the level of organization, discipline, drive, and goals. There's plans for practice that you just didn't see under the previous regime. And I think that'll transfer over. So I know people are kind of upset and like, we lost, we don't look too hot in the preseason. I think Coach Rivera held his cards very close to his chest. There are going to be some things that people are going to see on September 12th that you did not see in August. And you're going to be like, oh, okay. That's why this was going on. So I want to just tell everybody, relax. It was a very good camp. And the best thing about camp, no injuries.
Well said, Felix. A little bit over time, but we'll allow that. Sometimes you got to go into OT to wrap up a good point. Felix Trammell, Robbie Duncan, thank you as always for taking the time to chat Washington football with me. Redskins, Washington football team fans out there, you can find their Twitter handles under their names there. It's HGTR and Blessed for Felix, and Robbie Duncan OL for Robbie, and of course I'm at Chadwico TWW. You can find the Washington Wrap everywhere just by searching for the Washington Wrap. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, the web, where all those places, wherever you're engaging with this podcast, if you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify or Stitcher or Pocket Cast or whatever, leave us a rating and review. If you're watching us on YouTube, like and subscribe. If you're just seeing this on Twitter, retweet it, like the tweets, let us know your thoughts. As always, thank you very much for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time.